just okay against it, but I do like the Malygos Druid point. You know, I've banged this drum on multiple weeks that I feel like bringing Malygos Druid over any other variant of Druid only really makes sense if you want to like have a very soft target Bomb Warrior kind of strategy and you leave up Bomb Warrior and hope your opponent plays Highlander Priest or something else like that alongside it, so you have like a couple of really nice matchups for your Malygos Druid at that point. So the fact that Viper's at least doing half of that, you know, puts my mind at ease a little bit. But yeah, it's a very unique ban. I don't think we've seen a great deal of Secret Rogue bans up until this point. But Viper, again, continuing to do things a little bit differently, as he has been wont to do since he really burst onto the scene as a prominent Hearthstone player.
Yeah, and it's you know, it would be a shame if somehow he does get relegated in the season, because I do just love seeing what he submits week on week, because there's always something, even in the most standard-looking list. But we are ready to kick it off here. Casie versus Viper, game number 1. Warrior on the top, Malygos Druid on the bottom. So, looking at this, Sotil, are you favouring Viper in this overall matchup then?
I mean, in a vacuum, yes, I would say so. You know, Bomb Warrior has the goods to survive long enough against, say, a Survival Druid, where they can just clear enough boards, drop a couple of Brawls, drop a Barrel, Blade Storm one big thing, Shield Slam one big thing, and then hopefully by that time your opponent has blown up to the bombs that you put in their deck, right? Like, that can happen. When you have to stack all of that up with the fact that they can just kill you from hand as well, that becomes very, very problematic. Casie does just have kind of the juice here in terms of an aggressive game plan. The aggressive game plan isn't necessarily all you need to worry about from the Bomb Warrior side. I think more importantly here, Viper just has the Breath Beams ramp into Germination, so Viper is off to the races here early.
Yeah, and already with this, obviously the help of the Overgrowth as well, it does mean that Viper, even for just like plan A, even though I'm not saying this in priority order, but he has Ysera and Overflow just straight away, right? So even at worst case, never mind Malygos, he can just throw Ysera in early on in the game and then just start drawing cards and start proccing those dragons to give Casie a lot to deal with. And quite often, like oddly shaped minions, which means Blade Storm is significantly worse against boards like that.
Au contraire, Raven, I would very much like to mind Malygos, because now not only does Viper have that plan A Sarah into Overflow you were talking about, he also already has Malygos and Germination with some additional ramp left over, or some additional mana crystals left over with Innovate and Coin from that point as well. So if he can find Omu, if he can find Bloom and Moonfires, that's just a ton of burst damage thrown out on top of this Ysera over the next couple of turns as well. He is just going to dump their Coin and Innovate on the Ysera now, which I do like, because as Raven was mentioning, I think this is very much plan A with the way that Viper's hand has panned out.
And it still works towards Malygos, right? You are still planning to draw cards, which gets you to the Malygos combo.
Yeah.
It's just a nice benefit that you can just drop that Ysera in early. But in the meantime, though, Casie is putting on, I don't want to say like quite the aggressive front with a Risky Skipper and Armor Smith, but he is putting as much damage through to Viper as possible, getting some bombs shuffled in, and at least keeping the pressure relatively high. Oh, and there's Geppetto. I believe, just having a quick check here, with 2 beasts gone, there are only 2 beasts and Alex Straza and Omu left in the deck as minions, I believe. Imagine here that Viper's probably just going to go for the trade, take the easy trade onto the Armor Smith, just to get it out of the way. I think Viper, especially with the Ysera shuffled dragons in, is more than capable of chipping away enough armor to make the combo still completely relevant. It's not like Casey's going to be able to build a ton of armor altogether and be able to just like completely say, okay, you'll never be able to kill me with a big combo just because these dragons are kicking around.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit of an underwhelming overflow in the end from Viper, but it's still a very, very enormous board state. Casie is going to have to find some kind of clean answers here, or else this damage is going to start coming through way too quick. Yeah, no Shield Slam picked up here, so I don't think Casie really has any other option than what he's doing, which is just try and keep up as much aggression as he possibly can.
Viper is going to burn a card then, right? So, although it might burn a bomb, which is nice,
yeah,
it might also burn an Omu, which is less nice. Okay, I think that's fine. So Viper has 12 damage on board, which means he can already peel all of that armor away. I just wonder how much Viper thinks he might need to actually have the full combo, or whether he thinks he can maybe utilize some of it now to open up some hand space.
Yeah, there are issues here, where Viper still needs a number of turns to execute this, no matter which way he goes around it. And those might be a number of turns that Viper doesn't have when he's currently at 17, with 3 bombs in his deck already, and still facing down this huge weapon on the other side as well.
Yeah, it's why I was looking at Teacher's Pet Swipe, potentially, this turn as well. Swipe away the Armor Smith, go in, you kill the armor anyway. And my only worry is Glowfly is, although does line up well, does just make a Brawl just so much better.
Yeah, it makes Brawl completely insane on Casie's side, but it does protect against Blade Storm. It does avoid just underplaying into a Shield Slam as well.
And this is the thing, right? Viper saves a swipe here. That's what that play also does, right? He has an extra swipe in hand. But that's why I was wondering if he even feels he needs... Is this Ysera just never going to die? I just wonder if he feels he needs the additional swipe, if his board is that tanky.
Well, I think also a part of it is that he does feel like he just needs to get on with things, right? So he can just have the push there to just immediately have lethal on the following turn if there is no removal. Just max power. Sure. Say if you don't have Brawl, you don't have Brawl. Because he did have 2 huge minions in play on the previous turn, and sometimes a play Warriors might make in that position is just Brawl to kill 1 minion and then Blade Storm to kill the other one, right? Because there's just 2 such huge big things on board. So maybe he had a tiny soft read on no Brawl and just pushed in for the win, because let's not forget, he is under an enormous amount of pressure himself here. He is 1 weapon swing plus 1 bomb away from just losing this game.
And now Guardian Animals, I believe, would be Twilight Runner and Teacher's Pet to come down, so he would get the taunt if he did this, but the only issue is it would then delay him playing Geppetto, and this is one of the drawbacks of Geppetto in your Malygos Druid deck, is you have to find pretty much a whole turn to just play it. Like, it's very, very difficult.
And I think, you know, ideally, if Viper did have infinite time here, that just sounds so great, right? Like, you play Guardian Animals, you get the 2 beasts out of your deck that you don't want to draw, and then you Geppetto for the Alexstrasza and Omu that you absolutely do want. But, again, Viper just feeling like he doesn't have time to set everything up perfectly, so he's having to take a risk or 2 here.
But he hits the Omu, so Casie is extremely dead if he doesn't do something big this turn. Because one of the options this does open up is actually going Germination on the Malygos, potentially, depending on what cards are in hand. I guess we're only 1 Moonfire, you don't need to.
And this is very smart as well from Viper. This setup, as I said, not only did it potentially speed him up by 1 turn, which is also what happened, but you see there the secondary conclusion of what he did. Casie had no lethal setup there. He couldn't swing face and go for the bomb out because Viper removed the bomb outs from the equation by ending the turn with 10 cards in his hand. So Casie was just like, all right, I guess I just have to trade minions and hope I'm alive. But Viper had this all set up very, very nicely indeed.
Yeah, going to be a very quick game number 1 there between these 2 players, and I do agree. I even think that Geppetto play was just a tough one to just commit to because it felt so open at times. So if you just play it, you could take so much damage and maybe die. But with no board, like, you know, you broke down very well the pros and cons, and the payoff is if you hit Omu, guess what? You just win the game with that hand, and you did. So very, very close one indeed, but Viper at least gets first blood in that one.
Yeah, so he has an opportunity to do something very similar by playing Guardian Animals, because he can Guardian Animals and then Twilight Runner to fill up his hand with the rushing card draw, right, for a similar effect if there's minions there to trade into. But as I was saying, that doesn't really progress you a turn, right? Like, you still have to play the Geppetto to get yourself the win condition. So Viper found the line that still filled up his hand. As I was talking about, he was under pressure coming back the other way. He's not under enough pressure if there's no chance that you draw a bomb, which, you know, if you have 10 cards in your hand, there's no chance you draw a bomb. Bomb Warrior doesn't just throw damage at you unless they're in Galakron form already, which wasn't the case there. So I think that was a very, very nice, clean setup there towards the end from Viper.
Yeah, and it paid off. So Viper is now 1-0 over Casie so far. But we've got plenty more games to play out to decide who takes the victory here. For now, though, we are just going to go to a very quick break while we get our players ready for game number 2. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to dive straight into game number 2 between Viper and Casie. And I believe Casie is going to lock in his warrior again, but this time it's going to be up against the Mage from Viper. So a pretty different matchup, at least in terms of who's favored here. So.
Yeah, and I just want to put my Alan fanboy hat on for a second here and just say, if you did miss the APAC broadcast, find some time after we're finished to check out the VOD of Alan's matchup, because I think he played a particularly beautiful variation of this matchup of Bomb Warrior versus Mage. Kept himself alive on 1 HP while playing around, taking as much damage as possible for the entire game, turning down quite a few aggressive lines, which might have actually got him killed. But that's what we are going to look at here, potentially.
Yeah, and just taking a look at Viper's Mage list here, there is some of those few differences, right? There's Imprisoned Observer as a one-off he is still choosing to run. There's the one Conjurer's Calling in there and one Devolving Missiles. So along with an Arcane Intellect as well, which is, again, just yet again not common in a lot of the builds. So still definitely sticking to his guns on this list from last week.
Yeah, and I was kind of looking at this list in the context of him leaving up Warrior and trying to see if I can, see anything that would point to that being the case. And I guess a natural Conjurer's Calling, you could argue, is a card that you certainly want to have against Warrior. Arcane Intellect, maybe Just saying, you want to be able to dig through, find those power cards, keep your resource count high in hand. But Imprisoned Observer in your list as a leaving up warrior strat, probably not, right? So I think this is kind of like I don't want to call this any kind of like target strategy for Viper against the warrior, which you have to look at because banning warrior is so common that every time it's left up, you sort of start scanning for all the weapon removals and anti-warrior cards, right? But I think this is just a straight up conquest maths calculation from Viper, where he feels like he feels like he has a better spread against warrior than he does against some of the other decks.
It's just a more acceptable deck with his lineup to be left up, right? That's all it is. It's just more acceptable. It's like what you go for, like a normal ban style as opposed to anything too targetable. But we are going to see a good chunk of card draw in the early game here for Viper. And Casie, of course, has access to the double Corsair cash to get some stuff cooking for his side, but Viper already piecing together, like, half his deck at this point.
Apprentice, Mana Giant, right off the top. First 10 cards. He's already got the absolute juice here, which I imagine this has to be a magic trick here, right? For the double discount?
I think so, and I was half expecting that Discover to just be Evocation. Because that's just what the hand looks like, doesn't it? But yeah, I agree. I think at different points in the game, of course, Power of Creation is a very strong tool, but at this point, with this hand, fully on board with the magic trick.
And I even think at this point in the game with a different hand, Power of Creation would still be the pick there, right? Sure. But it's just this hand is just saying so clearly to Viper, you can just go fast here. Like, go ahead. The world is your oyster. Just do anything you want. Be degenerate over the next couple of turns and try and get that giant down as quickly as you can.
Viper might be committing one Sorcerer's Apprentice at least, because he does have that devolving missiles here.
Exactly.
So this is I knew it. It was a matter of time. That's all it was. It wasn't if, it was when. I was going to say it was more about reducing the giant down than it is about holding Sorcerer's Apprentice for some like mega evocation later in the game, because he didn't draw it yet. Now he can just do both, which, no arguments from me.
Yeah, this is kind of a hard hand to play here, though. Like, whether you go for the evocation right now, or, like, the other way to then look at it with Second Apprentice in hand is often, like, you dump your hand, you play everything else, and then you go for the Second Apprentice with the evocation. But if you look carefully at Viper's hand here, it's not dumpable, right? Like, one Thief replaces itself, Arcane Intellect doubles at the size in hand when you play it. Like, it's a very, very hard hand to clear out. So I do kind of respect Viper just going straight up for the evocation here and just trying to get as many spells playable this turn.
It wasn't too many at all, but he did gain a additional Astromancer Solarian in his hand, so he can drop that down a little bit later. He was expecting to see a Wrench Caliber after double Corsair Cash this game. I think just isn't too much of it. Let's just pack it up. Let's just pack it all up. We're done.
Yeah, Viper just going in here. Same deal as last time. If you have the Brawl, you have it.
To protect the Brawl.
Yep.
Insane. Casie, I think, just pretty fairly, he's like, I just can't press Brawl here because if it is Gower Spell, I just lose.
Exactly.
So they just have to take a turn off.
Casie smelled it. Viper had the 2-turn setup, recognized he could just play the Giant here. And now Casey's going to have to tank some damage to be able to unlock that Brawl now on the coming turn.
And Viper potentially has the opportunity to just juggle a lot more cards as well, as he does have his natural evocation in hand now. Means he can just go, and honestly, with what the rest of his hand is, I like it.
Yeah, this hand is a little bit more dumpable than it was before, plus Viper still has the opportunity to just find counterspell number 2 here. If it comes out, Elemental Allies is nice. Conjurer's Calling is playable, but there is also the option to go for a secret, like a bluff secret as Disruption, but that's probably too cute here. Yeah, I do respect just ripping the Conjurer's Calling.
Oh, not the best.
No.
8-drop Conjurers I've ever seen in my life, but it's still just more chunky stuff, and I actually really like the trades as well, because it again just makes Brawl not as good on this board. Even if there's a weaker or one of the weak 8-drops on board, it means Conjurers is just gonna... Is it a taunt?
I knew it! Casie tried to point his weapon face and then got the patented Casie look on his face, which pretty much guaranteed that the taunt was the one that was surviving there. And that's bad for so many reasons. One, because Casie couldn't go face there. He couldn't shuffle another bomb in. He couldn't deal any extra damage. But you see the real big impact is that it's just an 8-drop target left on board for the Conjurer's Calling here. And then Reason the Third, Arcane Devourer, comes off the Conjurer's Calling, one of the absolute nuttiest minions you can hit in Tempo Mage in a lot of positions.
Yeah, we're not going to see anything crazy happen just yet. But if that does live, Casey's probably just dead. And I think that's a fair expectation of that card in most of these outcomes in Mage games, right?
Oh.
If it does actually get to attack once, you're probably dead.
Oh, okay. Shield block, shield slam. Huge deal.
What about if he now shield slams the Betrug, Blade Storm, and swing?
That's very nice, yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Just do it the other way around, yep. Sequencing of the first two cards is not important.
Yeah, this was what he needed, honestly, to realistically survive in this game, because that was looking pretty grim.
Oh!
Oh, it's got to be prime into lethal, hasn't it? It's just got to be prime into lethal.
We saw that earlier, Tiz was a prime gamer. He threw it out immediately on an empty board in this exact situation and kind of got punished for it as he just rolling fireballed his own prime and didn't really achieve anything of note.
I do think after Blade Storm and Shield Slam, that and the armor, of course, being used up, so there's no natural armor for Casie at this moment, I do actually just think it's as good a time as any.
Alright, Viper agrees. He wants to dodge the removal spells here. That's the good one. He'll take that any day of the week. Yep, fine. Absolutely fine.
Oh, insane.
Yep, sign me up. Alright.
Oh, gee.
Honestly, as soon as that Conjurer's Calling hit, he could have cast nothing after that, and it still would have been a good prime.
Mirror Images might come back to back Viper, though. Nope. Oh! He knows both Brawls are gone. He knows one Blade Storm has gone. Press those Conjurer's Callings.
Do we want the Geddon? I feel like we don't want the Geddon. No. Yeah, alright.
It's a shield slam and a dream. No way to even activate Boom. Or the Boom bot, should I say, to actually try and, get them to kill off something here.
Right.
Or a lot of some things is probably needed, to be honest, but...
Yeah, there are 3 bombs in deck for the full stack, but as Raven was saying, no real way to leverage like that right now, and Casie taps out of game number 2. That is going to be Viper going up to a quick 2-0 victory, picking up 2 wins up against the Bomb Warrior, largely as intended at this point, I would say.
Yeah, it's looking really strong. Of course, the extra evocation into evocation and so on helped out massively. There was still card draw left for Viper, so it's not as if he was going to be out of the game no matter what. But the quick finish was down to just the back-to-back-to-back pressure that he managed to put forward there and just did not give Casie a second, especially with the help of that counterspell going into what was going to be a pretty good brawl turn for him. So Viper now only has this priest left, and it is the 2 of not Galakrond Priest, Malka Dragon Priest, especially as Viper is running this double Twilight Drake in his list. Have you had any more thoughts about that from last week? Because we did see this from Viper last week, and we are seeing some players add 1 in so far this week.
Yeah, it's caught on a little bit, hasn't it? I did try it out myself a little bit, and I do find them to be very useful additions in the Warrior matchup in particular, because they are just huge minions that kind of deserve a Blade Storm on the other side. That's quite often the only clean way to deal with it. Because surprisingly, in this matchup as Priest, you do quite often get a little bit of pressure down early just to control the armor, so it's unlikely that they build up a big shield slam to deal with a Twilight Drake in the early game if it comes down as like 4-6, 4-7 or bigger, as it often will. So it then just becomes one of those additional threats that really demands a key removal point from the Warrior. And if it's not removed, it represents a good chunk of damage each turn, which is great, but also just one of those massive apotheosis swing targets, which really does become the key to the matchup a lot of the time. Is can you stick a big enough minion where a single apotheosis can just become game winning? And I think that's absolutely the case with Twilight Drake here. So as we mentioned, Viper is an innovator. I think he considers himself a deck builder. He considers himself sometimes willing to operate outside the meta, and that a lot of people are too stuck in their ways of just playing the meta decks. It doesn't always catch on. It doesn't always permeate through the rest of GM that other people see Viper's ideas and go, wow, that's really smart, I'll start doing it. But yeah, Twilight Drake and Priest certainly seems to be one that he was ahead of the curve on.
Yeah, and even if you break it down as you do with most cards, right? You judge a card based on what does it do generally on curve, right? When it should be played in best circumstances. And like, look at the early game of Priest. Renew, well, that card replaced itself in hand. Draconic Studies replaced itself. Cleric replace itself. Raise Dead. Raise Dead. Bigger. Yep. Like a One Maker. All of these cards you actually do play early in the lead up to a Twilight Drake does not actually lessen the health of the Twilight Drake. So it's actually, it just makes sense to me, and not quite the same way, but we are going to see a Twilight Drake come down from Viper in this game as well by the looks of things. Yeah,
Viper saying, bathe. Bask in my genius. I am playing 3 copies of Twilight Drake in my Priest deck. That's just how good it is.
I do wonder if this is actually Wild Pyromancer into this board. Do you like that?
I kind of do, yeah. It's interesting because it does shrink your Twilight Drake by 1, right? On that same dynamic that we were talking about earlier, which might make it not necessarily worth it in this position.
Well, I think for me is the risky skipper being on board shrinks your Twilight Drake by 1 as well, right?
That's true.
And maybe more, right? If any minions are played, so I don't know.
When Raven's strange brand of twisted logic actually manages to make a good point. Yeah.
It's going to go for Sethic Veilweaver instead. It's a much more high priority kill target for Casie. He's going to go down.
I think this was potentially the reasoning behind the Sethic Veilweaver instead, is that actually the 3 health felt kind of important there to Viper because it required 2 minion procs from the opponent to be able to deal with it, as opposed to just 1 in the other case. And Casie there with a pretty fortunate top deck, but in a minor point where he would have probably argue he has been predominantly unlucky in this series so far.
And here's the interesting point now, isn't it? Maybe with this, it is just time for Apotheosis and keep it simple. Peel all the armor off. Leave a 1-1 and 1-2 on board, so even if a Bladestorm wants to clear his Twilight Drake up, Casie kind of has to like trade his minions away anyway, which doesn't feel fun. I like it.
Yep. And this is what I'm talking about. It's just a 6-10. It now requires absolute premium removal from Casie to be taken care of. And there it does. The Bladestorm does come off the top. Yeah, 1 extra armor missed from Casie.
Casie, one of the players not running Battle Rage in his warrior, I don't think, so can't even get away with that excuse. Is it madness, Saul? To coin out a Cabal Shadow Priest.
Coin 6-mana Yeti. Ugh.
You did just see what Casie had to do to clear that Twilight Drake, and there is another Apotheosis in hand now.
There is.
It's a stretch, do not get me wrong, but...
Yeah. I think that's the only argument, is because, like, you coin a 6-mana Yeti and you say, okay, I know my opponent can't deal with this. They don't have to. It's a 6-mana Yeti. They can just leave it there. Like, it doesn't mean anything. But since you have the Apotheosis to back it up, like, maybe there's a tiny opportunity. Yeah, I still hate it.
Oh, another Twilight Drake down now, or at least available for Viper. It does still have now a much more reasonable Cabal Shadow Priest, as he does get the 2-2 as well. Could follow up with a coin into Wave of Apathy to maybe protect some of their health if he wants to stop the 4-2. Or could just go the complete other way, steal the 4-2 as a lower attack, and just leave that 2-2 on the board.
Yeah, call it the other way. I would like to rephrase that as the strictly better way of doing it.
Sure. If he wants to use the coin at all, I think that was... That's the biggest consideration.
Right. But like you never steal the small one and then
Yes,
point
yeah,
shrink
yeah,
the
of
big
course.
one, right? That's stupid.
I am unbreakable. I am unstoppable.
Alright, Galakron, huge deal now for Casie. Gives him some inevitability in terms of the repetitive damage. And now, actually, because Viper went in with the big push early with the Apotheosis, that, from Casey's perspective, gives him a window, right? Because the deck doesn't really draw that many cards. He hasn't seen a bunch of spells tutored out of the deck until this point. So Casie might feel relatively confident that second Apotheosis isn't in hand for Viper, and feel like this straight-up aggressive route now into the Risky Skipper Blastmaster Boom could just end the game, which, honestly, it still might, even just through the second Apotheosis.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Look at the two sides of Casey's hand, right? He has Blastmaster Boom and Risky Skipper to combo for guaranteed bomb explosions if he wants to. He also then has Barov on the other side, so if big 1 or 2 or 3 big minions get made, it is a very easy clear for Casie to just say, nope, they're all gone now, and I'm still Galakron, so I can still punch you in the face every turn.
Yeah, I think, crucially, that second Apotheosis is what's checked by that Barov, because even if it happens now, Barov can deal with it, but say later on Casey's connected 1 or 2 more swings to the face, and Viper has to Apotheosis a minion in a hope that it at least gets to attack twice, or attacks once and gets attacked into, Barov, Skipper, or something similar can shut that down and make sure that it's only one heal being brought out from Viper.
I was just a little bit surprised we didn't see Ray's dead there. Would have helped Twilight Drake just a little bit, but also he would have. And you know, you're looking at Sethic, Twilight Drake as well to come back. I thought that was a potentially worthwhile play.
Sure.
Insane. I guess with 2 Pyromancers, Viper was worried about not having the spells to proc them with.
Sethic, Shadow of Death, he needs some help here. Most likely in the form of healing, since he knows he's staring down Galakron.
Is there ever a world in which Viper would smite first? Is that madness?
That's a good point, actually. I think he might do that, yeah, since you are so desperate.
And he can't exactly smite his own Sethic right afterwards, so I do actually like this.
Maximum opportunities for more Apotheosis, Renew, Radiance, more Holy Smites. No, not quite what he was looking for.
Viper could feel as if he needs to put another minion on the board here. He does have... You could even argue like too many Pyromancers in his hand right now.
Yeah.
There's not much he's expecting to get use out of them anytime soon, so maybe it's worth just throwing one down versus 2 health.
Yeah. Obviously, these Pyros are crucial in certain matchups. Face Hunter, Stealth Rogue, all of those kind of aggressive matchups trying to hunt you down. But the matchups that they're bad in, boy, do they look bad. They just get... They're Bloodfen Raptors or they're stuck in your hand the entire game. That's basically what it comes down to.
2 options here as well for Casie. Can go for the boom straight, hero power down the Sethic, which looks like just clearly option number 1. There was a Kronks into A8 Dragon as well, straight after seeing Shadow of Death removal, along with a Smite. But the Kronks after this turn seems much better, because you could just buff the board and win, right?
Yes.
Or deal 5 and win, and so on. So I think the flexibility of Kronks is better saved for this next turn, so I like this overall here.
This is just a board clear. Wait, you don't Pyro first, right? Yes, exactly. Okay. That was about to go very badly wrong for Viper. You smite, Pyro, smite. This is the order.
Right. Guess he has a spare Pyro just in case.
That's true. That is true, yeah.
Maybe he wanted to soak more damage? I don't know.
Yikes.
Oh, wow. Not what you want to see when your opponent's Galakron.
Someone's got to lead the charge.
Yep, 6 more going face. 1 bomb outer, and this is bomb number 5 going into the deck, I believe.
Yeah, the difference Galakrond hero power makes is insane, and there's just the bomb. To finish off the game, Viper does not clear Casie 3-0 here. Casie does manage to get a win with that warrior, but there's still a lot left, and honestly, I do think that that Viper still has some good matchups with this priest. I don't think, as we were mentioning earlier, it wasn't, oh no, Casey's won with his warrior, the series is over, Viper's missed because he was hard targeting it. It was just one of those matchups, right? It's just slightly better overall. So by no means the end of the world here for Viper.
Yes, so Viper's Priest now has Mage Druid to go up against on Casey's side. The Mage matchup, I think, is largely considered a flip at this point. The Mage does have pretty much infinite resources to keep going, keep pressuring, but if the Priest can outlast or it can find a good tempo swing turn, that can often be enough to get the Priest out in that matchup. And then Mali Druid, at least Viper is playing the right Priest for the job. I think the 2-Ops Priest does have a better matchup against the Mali Druid than the Highlander Priest does. And it's another matchup, honestly, where a 3-mana Twilight Drake, if it gets discounted by Draconic Studies, could actually have a big impact on the matchup just because it's such a big minion so early that Druid might struggle to deal with.
Yeah, I do think it's important to know once we get to the Mage matchup as well, is Casie actually isn't running any devolving missiles in his list, and you can see that have a great impact against Apotheosis targets. So it would give Viper a little bit more freedom to just do one of those Apotheosis, maybe even on curve plays, and be pretty sure unless it gets frozen out or generated polymorph, it's going to stick. But I do believe we are going to be going into that Druid matchup first. So it's going to be the Druid versus the Priest. And Casie does have the Malygos Druid, and just having a quick glance over, the big difference between Casie and Vipers that we saw earlier was the Beast makeup, whereas Casie is running 1 Thresher, 1 Teacher's Pet, 2 Twilight Runners, and I believe Viper was running just 2 Teacher's Pet, 2 Twilight Runners. So a bit of a big deal when you're facing down a deck like Priest when they do build that early board. Having that Thresher pulled out could make a difference, actually.
Yeah, and there's also one supporting change that plays into that philosophy as well, whereas Viper was playing 2 Nature Studies, Casie is playing 1 Nature Studies and 1 Broom, because he has a Thresher in his deck as well, which I think, you do generally have to have that insurance policy of the Broom in any deck you run Thresher in, because it's just such a bad card to draw if you're never able to rush it for the entire game.
Yep. I feel like we say in every single Druid game where we see it get played out without a Broom, it's like, wow, imagine if he had Broom. It's like, this is 100 times better. Getting into it. Viper does have an early Sethic, and I've seen this play almost every time that it's available to just play it out, almost regardless of matchup as well.
I wonder.
Yeah, it's a little awkward. So I want to play Sethic here because I don't want Pyro in my Raised Dead pool. I want to cultivate it a little bit better than that. I want to play minions on curve against Druid. That's step 1, right? So, playing one of these seems reasonable. The problem is that kind of then dictates you into a Mind Flayer Kaj turn if you're just planning to play out a curve. And I guess that's fine just as a 3-3, but it's not like Druid's going to have a minion here most of the time for you to be able to Kaj on curve, right? But I think just playing out minions into a nicely cultivated Raised Dead pool here is perfectly reasonable. Now there's options, though, to actually float a mana and just go for the second Sethic instead.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that Kaj and Sethic being your Raised Dead is fine, even if they are sort of feel worse at the time versus Druid. But yeah, now I still don't know. Is Kaj just fine anyway? Because I'm worried that with the Sethic gone down and still no spells in sight, you are kind of just throwing them out to the void and hoping you get at least 1 back from Raised Dead soon.
Yeah. Playing Kaj here also enables you to spend 4 mana very cleanly next turn on just going Pyro Sethic if you want to. You probably just spend your mana, right? I can't make myself not.
Well, for me, if it gets cleaned up soonish, it's probably a Guardian Animals, right? If it gets cleaned up next turn. And then Raised Dead and then Kajin a Guardian Animal card is normally pretty good as a response to that, right? So, yeah, I think it does lead pretty well. I think the harder decision now, based on Viper's next draw, is does he actually play the Wild Pyro and potentially make his Raised Dead worse?
Well, you just cash the Raised Dead now,
first.
right?
Yeah.
Right. You just cash it out now, and then you just play more minions.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree with the way this opening curve has been played from Viper. I don't think it was obvious. I don't think it was necessarily super easy, but I think I would have made all the same plays.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because it looks like Viper's just had everything dealt with, and he's just trying again with small minions. But look at what Casey's not done. Look, just take a look at the mana count, everyone. Because in this weird universe that we're in right now, the priest has more mana than the druid right now, and it's turn 5. So definitely good there. Although Viper's not had access to ramp, if he had ramped instead, he wouldn't have been able to deal with the board. So kind of a win-win for Viper there.
Right. And honestly, on Casey's side as well, I think he's absolutely done the right thing, which is he has spent his mana as the druid. I think a lot of intermediate or more casual players get lost when they don't hit the ramp as druid.
Right.
Because they just be like, oh, it's just a 1-3 on the other side of the board. It's just a 2-2 on the other side of the board. Why would I waste X card on dealing with that now? Because you have mana that needs spending. That's why. You just spend your mana on killing whatever is on the board in front of you if you don't hit the dream ramp turn. So you can buy yourself as much time as possible to actually naturally creep up the mana curve and play all of your expensive bombs.
Yeah, you have to think of mana as like Meeseeks, right? Where it's made and it just wants to do its job and leave. That's all it wants to do. So spend that mana.
Yes. No, there's still only one acceptable Rick and Morty reference, Raven. I'm not adding another one to the repertoire.
Come on, that one's pretty good.
It was alright.
Yeah, though, I think Viper would love to Wave of Apathy and Cabal Shadow Priest, but not available right now. So you might just have to be happy with a Twilight Drake for now, and then try and do something a little bit better next turn. Unless you think that a Mind Flayer turn looks a little bit nicer here.
He does indeed. The big question, though, is what does the rest of the turn mean? Because that Wave of Apathy really wants to get reserved for turn 7, right? And it kind of looks essential here in terms of filling out the curve. So I think Viper just ends up floating the 1 and dropping Sethic Veilweaver here. Yeah, this is what it is. I'm not sure what's harder, convincing me to float mana or convincing Casie to trade. They're both entirely illegal.
Whoa, that was a good trade. That made his minion bigger.
Yeah.
Now is the turn. Wave of Apathy, Cabal Shadow Priest on the Mukla. The Kaj can trade into the Twilight Runner and create a Twilight Runner.
Yep.
It's the turn Viper's been waiting for and setting up for, to be fair.
It is. He does massively stifle his Twilight Drake here just for 1 turn, but as you mentioned, he's getting a Twilight Runner out of this deal with the Death Rattle from the Kaj, and then he has Raised Dead in his hand as well. So he should be able to make that a very sizable threat on the next turn anyway.
Yeah, and he just gains a 5/5, which right now is kind of bigger than the Twilight Drake. It's close.
In a way, Viper might be slightly frustrated that such a big minion did come out of the Teacher's Pet here, though, because he might have even not wanted to do this turn, because there's so many actually enormous threats that are going to come down from Druid. But because there's actually so much pressure on the other side of the board because of the Mukla, he just kind of felt obligated to have the swing turn right now. Mirazond is just a Guardian Animals, which is no bueno.
Yep. Oh, suddenly, the Twilight Drake and Mind Flayer Kaj again doesn't seem so bad. Nice filling out the curve. Does mean that with Casie still on a pretty full hand, Viper's got to expect at least a half-decent Mirazond in the near future. Does have to leave this Thresher up, though not quite got enough damage to clean it off.
And that's the ugly part. Doesn't really matter how big your board's getting if you can't answer a Lake Thresher the turn after it comes down.
Just for a second, I was like, is this just Alex and go?
Omu. Gidra was the whiff, though. Casie did exhaust his beasts with the guardian animals, so it was just those two and the Mali left in the deck. Gidra was the one big whiff. Casie did hit it, but he still has plenty of damage built up, even if he draws Mali naturally now with the 1-mana Omen.
Yeah, that's it, right? I think if he drew Mali instead, then it's just a pretty clear win, because he just has 1-mana Mali double swipe Moonfire. But yeah, he's getting the worst outcome, I guess, overall.
Okay.
I was a little bit surprised that turn, actually.
Okay. Okay. Hello.
Okay.
What were you surprised about?
Just for, well, maybe the speed in which Casie did that turn. I was just wondering, because Murozond was played, the Broom would have actually killed off the Thresher, right? So I wanted to just sit and think about what Murozond did that turn, but then Viper was just already at it. So I assumed it would not do enough. But maybe not surprisingly, his brain working a little bit quicker than mine. I guess the assumption with seeing the beasts that the Geppetto was always going to be at least powerful. There was no like great whiff chance with seeing the Guardian Animals and Thresher get played out.
Nature speaks through us.
Oh, there's Germination though.
Sweet.
So
You made a 3/3. Good job.
So Gidra's just like mega buffed, right? If it's a 1-mana 1/1?
Yeah.
That's like a buff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah. Sure. It's harder to make value trades, which makes it harder to use the Wind Fury, you could argue.
Sure,
like,
sure.
The fact that it has so much health to begin with makes it get value trades really easily. Gidra, Breath of Dreams, and a Twilight Runner now in the Murozond.
Seems pretty solid to me. I don't see a great way that Viper can deal with this Twilight Runner, so why not just make the biggest board?
Well, he could just start the Sethic chain again.
Well, he could always start with Renew, which I think is absolutely fine. But unless this is an incredible spell, I think it almost has to be Murozond. Wave. It's wave that must be, right?
Power Infusion, alright.
Quickly.
It can't be better than Murozond, right?
No, I agree.
Just purely because now Gidra Power Infusion.
Yeah, and I actually like this sequencing because, as you were just alluding to, he now preserves the spell burst on the Gidra, makes that a must-kill threat alongside everything else. It's kind of representing lethal, but I think that was the Mali off the top. It absolutely is, and now with the 1-mana Gidra being squeezed in, sorry, the 1-mana Omu being squeezed in there. This is Casey's playground now. He can do this whichever way he would like to.
Yeah, gotta pick your poison at this point, to be honest.
This series coming all the way back. Casie was on the brink, but it is the 2-ofs Priest that is now struggling for Viper, and we're going to go into a hotly contested matchup for game number 5, Raven. It's going to be Mage versus Priest, which, as I mentioned before, I think is largely a flip. This one really can go either way.
Yeah, and that's it. And you kind of... I don't want to say the decks play out in a similar fashion because it's just not really true. But I think part of it is the fact that both decks can generate a ton of resources. So the chance of like starving one or the other out is so small, I think, at least from my experience, that it is very much just back and forth until one player. It's not that one player runs out of stuff. I just think it's till one player can't quite keep up with the power level of the previous turn, and then they start to just fall behind. So I don't think we're going to see anyone starve out here. It's just going to be who has the most powerful turns most often, actually, in that one, and then the game will just suddenly end. It's a pretty cool matchup, actually. I think I just like a lot of Mage matchups because they end up playing out so differently.
Casey's list, very clean. 2 OBS and legendaries all the way through in terms of his mage deck. No devolving missiles, as Raven was talking about earlier, which can not only be a big deal against Apotheosis, but also against the tech card we've been talking about a lot this series, just Twilight Drake on curve, right? Not really a good way in Mage to deal with that because it's so overstatted for the cost. If it comes down on turn 3 or turn 4, devolving missiles would be a very, very clean answer to that. But Casie is once again on the Kobold Spellkin Arcane Breath package, which he did have a few teasing words for when Orange first debuted the list on stream and on Twitter, but Casie seems to be converted about this. I did ask him, just in a private message, like, oh, what made you come around to this? He's like, I just noticed I was winning more with it, so I submitted it. I mean, I can't really argue with that. No, it makes sense to me.
It's better when I play it.
Yeah. But I do think that's an important mentality issue with competitive players, right? Is that Casie, has some fun and he teases people and he will, stand by his opinions and he's not afraid to argue with people, but he's not stubborn to the point of, well, I'm going to nerf my own win rate by not admitting I was wrong, right? That's when things actually start to get a bit sticky. So, much respect for him to be switching to the list that he now believes is better.
Yeah, and it does mean that there is just access to that more and more value-based game plan, potentially. Spellkin, of course, generating 2 one-cost spells, and then the helping with that is the fact that the Arcane Breath then generates more cards, and so on, so on. It's going to be an interesting way just to see how both players manage this, because just as much as Casie can play super fast or slow, we've seen time and time again that Priest and Viper specifically in this series can generate a fairly aggressive opening board. So we'll see how it pans out here. Casie, lightning fast with the mulligans. Viper, taking his time a little bit more. What do you like as keeps from here? Because honestly, this hand just altogether does not look so bad.
It looks pretty fantastic, honestly, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Turn 1, Draconic Studies. Turn 2, Cleric of Scales, something. Turn 3, Twilight Drake. Yeah.
It's just one maker, because why not?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Kobold Spellkin. Grind this value.
We are in just the age of the one-cost spells at the moment,
Yes.
aren't we? That is just the age we're living in.
So now even do you just straight up coin it? Your curve now kind of supports that. The fact that you have Kaj and Lazul as additional follow-up options for turn 3.
I think I want to be greedy and just play the one maker anyway.
Okay.
But it wouldn't overly upset me to see it coined out, because as you quite rightly pointed out, there's a ton of options, and the scale, I think I call it Scalebane, the Spellkin to help out on 5, right, just keeps that cooking. So yeah, I think honestly we're just going to get a good idea of what Viper thinks about this matchup and how to approach this than what we do here, because he's almost got too many good choices.
Yeah. Biggest minion on curve.
And most importantly, 4/6 just doesn't really die to anything, right? You're not going to get double Ray of Frosted this turn for it to get killed. There is a polymorph there, but here's my question. Was there ever a point where that polymorph was too slow, or do you think Casie just has to have an answer to an Apotheosis this turn?
I think he needs answers to Apotheosis, yes. I think the polymorph will be too slow based on what's happened, although maybe the Kaj can still get answered here. But I think the big fear there was just Apotheosis came down. He doesn't have answers. And even if nothing happened that turn that he needed to poly, you'll get to poly something over the course of a matchup against Priest. I think that's fairly clear.
Viper's going fishing. Now you do have to sit back and think, how quickly can Viper reduce the cost of a mana giant right now? Because with 2 Spellkin in hand, a Wand Maker is very doable.
Yep. Raise dead.
I wonder.
Yep. It looks good to me, honestly, yeah. Like, if he didn't have 2 Spellkin, I'd always make the argument for picking one, but he has 2. He's got all the spells he needs in the world. Like,
Gets offered all of the options that help to discount that Mana Giant as well.
what about Raise Dead? And next turn is just like double Raise Dead Twilight Drake. Let's go. And just make a massive Twilight Drake.
Kind of like it. Viper does too.
I am assuming the Twilight Drake dies in this scenario, of course, because if it doesn't die, then it can't be raised, but...
Yeah.
Could trade it off if he really wants to.
Could. It's slightly awkward because it's just not nice breakpoints on board right now.
On wings of destruction, they
The
come.
sheep!
Yeah, I think I like this because it just gives so many more options, right? Like Apotheosis is potentially great here. Picking up a Renew here was great as well, just to get the big heal back on the Twilight Drake, since the trade on board is currently so bad with the injured Twilight Drake. So I think reviving the Cleric of Scales here did make sense.
A really tough call as well, right? Because like the Apotheosis does... the Apotheosis kind of just heals the Twilight Drake for the same in a roundabout way, but also the Renew gains him just another spell on top of that, so pretty tricky. It ended up going for the Shadow of Death, which I'll be honest, Sottle, was not the one I was looking at.
So I guess he took the death because he just wanted to have the death, and then he trusted that his second Cleric would still give him either of the options that made this turn a reasonable play, because he knows he has to deal with the Mana Giant on the other side, right? He's seen it.
Yeah, exactly.
Was a risk though. Second Cleric could have whiffed.
Pretty good defense there from Casie, honestly. That was looking very rough. I just defend off the 2 big minions and get the Mana Cyclone down. And whoa, okay. Pretty high value cards there.
That's the heat in Casey's hand now.
Whereas Viper's just left with a sheep right now as he has two sheep in hand.
Yeah, that was the sketchy part of that. There were two like slightly suspect parts of what Viper did last time. One was that the second Cleric could potentially whiff on the Apotheosis. But then, yeah, the fact that he was raised deading sheep over and over, I guess, has to be questionable as well. But, you know, honestly, raised dead just for a Cleric of Scales, which then gets you another spell that you want to potentially use to swing the board that turn, is probably a fine card.
I also think it was incredibly unlikely it whiffed, right? Double raised dead was gone.
That's true.
The death then is gone. So I think there's only, 4 spells? And one of them's also, as well, Soul Mirror, which I think would have been a fine response to a Giant as well.
Yeah, that's true. Draconic Studies, Soul Mirror, the Apotheosis, Wave of Apathy. There's still Renew as well. There's a few. But yeah, I think there was enough redundancy there that it was unlikely to go very wrong. Makes sense.
Casie now was looking a little bit down and out earlier on, but honestly, that Cyclone actually paid off big time. Still not able to get a Giant down yet, though. Or I guess he was able and chose not to, should I say.
I wonder.
Are we about to see the sheep god or something here? Like the higher being of sheep? Because it could take an Apotheosis.
Yeah. A sheep achieving Apotheosis. I'm not sure if that exists in any particular culture. If it does, let me know. But
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm just going to throw it out there. If we're going to have Prime cards again, I want Sheep Prime. That would be sick, wouldn't it? It's just a 1/1, shuffles in, comes out, wings. You'd be like, whoa.
No. Sheep Prime is like a 20/20 that turns every other minion on board into a 1/1.
Oh, that would be so sick.
Yeah.
But the animation, it would do it one by one, and the animation would be super slow. Because it's that powerful, it will make you wait.
Nice.
Yep, that's a snap pick.
Pick the one.
Okay, elemental allies, 2 spell wings in hand. Certainly going to give Casie the juice this turn. He's already playing 1 mana giant though, so he can just now use one of the spell wings on the following turn.
Oh, Soul
Finish
Mirror
off.
would be magnificent right now for Viper.
Yeah.
Oh!
Okay.
Oh, Casey's gonna go. Don't drink, Casey, you'll spit that out. I was like, don't you be drinking when you see that Shadow Word Ruin.
That's what we call in the business a swing turn, Raven. Elemental allies procced, Sorcerer's Apprentice in play, Evocation in hand, spell damage cram session lined up as well. An enormous spell damage cram session potentially, if Casie wants it.
Yep, that's what this game looks like it is coming down to. This is pretty much what I'm used to seeing in this matchup, because although that was an incredible turn from Viper, Casie, look at the turn he potentially has if this Evocation's half decent, right? Like, he could also just remove this board or generate huge threats for himself. Another Polymorph, a Potion in the hand there as well.
Tune Sculptor, Star Scryer, Dart Frog. Dart Frog's okay.
Time runs out on me.
I like this from Casie though in terms of sequencing, looking in his Evocation first before he really committed to the cram session. Seeing what he wants to spend his mana on with maximum information. It's a big turn, but it's not threatening. Obviously the Apprentice is, but Viper at 25, Casie hasn't built up any kind of board state that Viper really needs to be afraid of here.
Right, and that's it, isn't it? Because Casie, especially with the Polymorph, the Sheep down as well, he can't expect the Apprentice to live even with 2 frozen minions, right? Like, I don't think you would expect that to hang around. And if that's not going to live, then you end up with like 2 Arcane Missiles and a bit of a dream. Power of Creation is great, of course, but to what end, right? I think that's the big problem. And it's also one of the downsides of choosing not to play a in-deck Conjurer's Calling, right? You can't go for those extra, just big, repetitive power play turns of just big minions. Or at least not as consistently, anyway.
Viper trying and failing to find a way to deal with this Apprentice this turn, I'm sure. So Casie is going to get have a whole free turn here. Yep. Let's see what's in this cram session. Oh! It's all so disgusting, Raven! It's all so disgusting.
Yeah. Luckily, mana exists, so Casie cannot play all of them at the same time.
There's an Apprentice in play! Mana doesn't exist!
Make that Apprentice reduce the Prime to 0 and I'll be happy.
Alright, I'll find a way.
Wow. It's also just a lot of damage. 10 damage from 2 Arcane Missiles there. Just remember, a lot on the line for both these players. Not only scores, Casie would go up to 3-1, of course. Viper would go down to 0-5 if he loses. But maybe even more importantly, bragging rights online.
Much more importantly, Raven. Casie did largely whiff on that evocation. I would say he was looking for Frostbolt, Arcane Missiles, really just more castable cards to deal damage that turn, so he can follow up with the potential of Solarian Prime or Raz or Power of Creation to find lethal out of nowhere.
Yeah, Psyche Split, definitely powerful. But does he have to start considering whether Lazel's scheme can get some work done? It's very, very tough call here. None of these cards are mind-blowing, and I think he might actually be looking at like Aeon Reaver in the the Apprentice at this point.
Yeah, he's been scrambling to find an answer for this thing for multiple turns. He went with one maker on the previous turn, which I believe the only answer available was the Holy Smite from that position, which is 1 out of 8. There's 8 spells that you can get. He's had
just
the option
fire and steal it.
This turn he could have done, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I looked at that too late to actually decide whether it was good or not.
Mm. Yeah, it was an option this turn, for sure. Dragon drawn for Casie, which gives him some straight-up opportunities to push for lethal with more damage. He's going to bank the Raz.
Raz coming down now. Absolutely huge. Clears away the minion, gets to push the most damage face as a secret to back it up. Viper, you always have to consider counterspell as a #1 issue, but honestly, even Netherwing is a bit of a problem here, as it's just more minions for Viper to try and deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You can steal the Raz now, though, right?
Checks for counterspell. It's the bad news that actually this is probably the worst one for him in this scenario.
Yeah.
Since he had counterspell checked, he wouldn't have minded if it was counterspell. Netherwind Portal is actually much worse for him with the plan that he has, which was to steal the Raz.
So does he play the one maker first, just to see what he has access to here? Because outside of heal, he can always play one maker, right? If he wants to give up the heal.
That's the question. Does he want to heal?
He's only facing down 6? I think it's fine, because it could be very good.
He leaves himself dead to Fireball, dead to a Pexis Blast. He knows there is still one spell being held onto here, which could very well be burst damage. Does end up going for it, finds the Renew.
You could now take the pain for next turn and still just steal the Raz.
Mm-hmm.
Although Shadow Madness, the assumption, I guess, that you can actually use the cane to kill off something else next turn. Probably fair.
I have become one with the void.
Jeez.
The portal's back. Alright, this is what Casie wants to see. He's largely interested in damage right now, I would say. You'll always take those, though. You'll always take those! Oh, monstrous Prime from Casie.
And what a turnaround here from a series that looked like Viper was going to be able to 3-0. Casey's fought all the way back. The Soul Mirror helps, and Viper can test with the Shadow Word Death.
That's
Is it going
fair.
to be enough? Because Casie still just has stuff.
Yeah, Casie nowhere close to running out of options here.
He just has to Soul Mirror, right? He just gets 2 Sunwalkers, and the cane actually kills itself off, which is huge, of course.
Just resting my eyes.
Job's done.
Trade off the lab partner in the end, just to deal 1 damage. Prevent a value trade on the other side from the Sunwalkers into the Sunwalkers. As we mentioned, Casie just marches on from this point.
So he's just sat with Power of Creation in hand for a good chunk of this game as well.
Yeah.
And although I'm not saying he should have played it by now, but I just mean there's just more and more waves, whereas Viper, down to a Spellkin and a Dream right now.
Curious as to whether this was a Dart Frog turn from Casie. He's already committed 1 spell at this point. It's coming down after the fact, which I guess he did get information on the spell damage minion before committing to this, but I wonder whether it should have just come into play straight away.
Yeah, sources of 1 damage look quite powerful on this board, don't they?
Yeah. It's fine though. He's using the Arcane Breath. He kind of needs to point it at a minion anyway. So no real harm done.
I will crush your delusions of grandeur.
Now Viper's running out of cards he can even draw to make a difference here.
A simple spell.
Okay. Can choose to smite to deal with 1 more minion, or he can take the healing instead. He's going to go Mind Vision, which suggests he's playing all 3. That's actually very useful to Viper, because that card on the far left, the last remaining randomly generated spell, I'm sure has been on Viper's mind for some time. Because quite often when a card gets held for that long, it's burst damage that Casey's trying to end the game with.
Yeah, exactly right. You got to fear fireballs, pyros, even apexes and so on. There is enough of it to be worried. But again, the problem is I don't know what singular really thing that Viper can do that's going to dig him back here.
Yeah, it's a problem. He's already done it. It's Soul Mirror, and it's already gone at this point.
Oh, there's the wave! I think Casie did say he was going to.
I don't know whether that was like the Scream, the painting, or like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. Like I'm not quite sure what the reference was, but okay.
Yeah. Either way. You know what, Saul? I don't think I want to know, because I think I'd be worried either way.
Okay.
Oh wow, Onyx Mage scribing to Smite into another wave of apathy. Does that do it?
No.
No, it doesn't.
I guess it does, actually. There's technically 5 showing if he does that, because he still has the trade available as well. Doesn't hit it, though.
No, not going to be good enough. I believe that's Viper taking another loss here. Casie flat and wave. Viper goes 0-5. He is in Division A though, so although Casie is waving goodbye, it is not any form of guaranteed relegation for Viper at all. Division A means that he might end up, or is likely to end up in a sort of fight for to not be relegated, but it's not guaranteed. So if you're a Viper fan, don't you worry quite yet. Don't believe Casey's actions all the time.
It's okay, guys. You have my permission. You are allowed to just take 5 minutes off the broadcast to go check Twitter. That's fine. You're allowed to do that if you really, really want to. yeah. It's fine. Yeah, Raven, you go check. I'll handle it.